Oh my goodness. Welcome back, friends. My name is Jeff Fritz, and that is Richard
Hi.
Campbell.
Yeah, and you're working for a living today, friend. I was you stream earlier.
Yeah. This is Virtual DEVintersection. This isn't my stream, my goodness. Yeah, I was over there. We were writing some code earlier, doing all the Blazor things. I am consistently impressed with all the cool things that's going on there to make application development for folks a heck of a lot easier as we look at the 2020 state of the internet, right?
Well, I'm impressed with the buzz around Blazor. Like the ecosystem as a whole has sort of jumped on board. Lots of control suites, different groups are working on different things. Like it's an interesting technology, and it certainly speaks to folks that have been involved in web development on the Microsoft stacks for years. The server side implementation, anyway.
Yeah, it feels right for us, for those folks that are um, familiar with the component stack. But I also look at folks that are using widgets that work with Angular and Vue, right? They've got all those different things that they're already bringing in, and they're just now starting to feel and go, hey, this makes sense to have reusable
It's work.
components.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is interesting to balance between what is written in JavaScript, what's written in C sharp. Like, what do you like? Like, what makes you happy there? I think there's an energy around this idea of I just want to code in C sharp all the time, and Blazor is my solution to that. And that's not the only way.
No.
Truth in that.
I got into this very heated discussion with folks over on Twitter about, gosh, you should be using this, amount of refactoring, these number of classes and interfaces, and how you make everything isolated, and you need this level of complexity if you're going to build any type of application.
Mm.
Really?
Yeah, we've been battling this problem of making software development more complicated than we need to for a while. I mean, without a doubt, when you get a team of people with an important piece of software that needs to be maintained over a substantial amount of time, yeah, some formality is important.
Oh my gosh, yes.
But hacking's fun too.
Right. There's a point where it makes sense to build just what you need. You don't need to go too much further than that. Deliver it, and somebody's going to come back and say, "Oh, technical debt." Well, wait a sec. Technical debt is
yeah.
I have the perspective that technical debt is something that only comes into play. It's only something you should be concerned about if you haven't planned on, or you didn't know that requirement was if you knew that requirement was coming, right? If you knew there was another requirement coming, yeah, you should plan for and be able to handle that. But if you don't know it's coming, don't refactor to make the ultimate, most flexible, amazing application framework.
Well, and yeah, this is a balance between technical debt and Yagni. Like, you ain't gonna need it, right? You can't anticipate all things, and you'll just get stuck in this cycle of trying to add things on the possibility it's needed rather than the reality, which is just do the bits you need and be prepared to refactor.
Yeah, right. There's the analysis paralysis happens to too many folks in our industry, and then they get lost. They don't know what to do. And this comes back to perfect is the enemy of good enough.
Mm-hmm. And there is no such thing as perfect ultimately when we talk about software.
Yeah.
Right. It is only ever a journey. There's always more to do. And it's also useful recognizing you are never your customer, that all your decisions are probably wrong. So the sooner you can get stuff into the hands of customers and watch how they're actually using it, start to understand what they need, the closer you're going to get to the perfection you're after.
Can we talk about that little bit there for a second? Watching how your customers use the product, whether it's a game that you're making, a website, an application, a mobile app, watching how folks use it is sometimes very eye-opening.
Yeah, and the detonation that was our conversation with Donovan Brown a few days ago.
Tremendous episode.
Right, like he just went off, but we didn't. I don't think we spent enough time on instrumentation because it's one of those really broad conversations. I mean, you start with the app insights, just plugging onto when an error is raised. Are we catching it in a meaningful way? Can we sort of sort them out, decide which ones we need to fix, which are causing problems, which are not?
Oh yeah.
But instrumentation of utilization, like how people actually use your app. What features are they going into? What are they spending their time in? Because it is so eye-opening. You're always wrong. You use your app completely differently from the way your customer uses it. And when you can actually watch that for a while, really study it and say, hey, they never clicked that button you love so much.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, that's how they use it. They're doing something different with it. And so they complain about friction because they're using it differently than you, and you can change that.
Oh my gosh, yes. Right? And that opportunity to change, that's when reevaluate your architecture. That's when make sure you're doing the right thing to push stuff out.
Yeah, I think that's even further down the path. I mean, the first thing is resist the instinct to tell them they're doing it wrong, right? Because that is the instinct. You had a plan. It just, the line I always use back when the dev says that one to me is like, "Am I holding it wrong?"
Yes.
From the iPhone. Right?
Oh my goodness, yes.
Yeah, well, and it's exactly the same statement. If you blame the user because they're using the software differently than the product differently than you are, that's on you, man. You look at what they're doing. How did we get here? What's the logical correction? They probably went down the path of least resistance.
And I think Fuel Snable, I'm taking a look at some of our friends here in the chat room. There's some pretty good comments here. I want to go to Fuel Snable's comment here. Let's see if we can get that to pop up. Do I have it here?
Gizmo?
I don't see. You know what? I don't have it. I thought I had it here. 1 second, friends. I had the thing. 1 second. Let me add the featured chat back in. There we go. Add the gizmo for the thing. And I made this just a little bit smaller so that it would fit. Because we want to be able to show some of the comments from you on screen. Because I think it makes a lot of sense to show some of these comments as we're going along here. There we go. So Fuel Snable says right there in the middle, reminds of the classic daily WTF that had the competition of writing the most over-engineered calculator ever. Oh my gosh. Right?
I like when we make fun of ourselves this way too, right? When we just like, if you want to overthink something dumb.
Yeah. And similar to that, Duncan Kruger chimes in and saying, planning for the unknown may end up costing more than technical debt.
Well, it is a kind of technical debt too, right? You've stuck a bunch of widgets and shunts and things in places that you're never going to plug into, and they're all distractions. They're all more code than you needed.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. And finally, along those same lines, Jonathan chimes in here with a very good point. Sometimes engineers aren't allowed to talk to end users, and the product owners don't want you talking to them. That feels a little misplaced. That feels...
It's very old school.
Yeah.
And we weren't actually talking about talking to users either, for a very good reason.
Okay.
You lie, right? But problem one. More importantly, that's not fair. Most people want to please, right? And so when you ask them questions about something you happen to care a lot about that they don't actually care that much about, they're going to find a way to please. So they're going to have opinions about things that are not strongly held. Actually, I was talking about instrumentation and like when you actually can see data of how software is utilized, which is the ultimate truth.
Sure.
That this is how they actually use the software. These are the methods that were called. These were the keystrokes that were entered. Like that's the information to me that's the most interesting, because you're too far out of the interface at that point. Plus, you don't have to leave your office, right? Because goodness knows you want to do that, but that you're actually getting telemetry back into the system that is comprehensive. The other challenge when you start talking to users is you're only going to talk to the ones that want to talk to you, so it's automatically right. I'm working on the history of .NET, and there's all these great stories that's over. This is not really a history of .NET story, but it is a Steven Sinofsky story.
Oh, do tell. Now we're hearing the new things about the new Windows that's going to run on the dual screen devices. Mr. Sinofsky has
strong opinions.
Yes.
Well, he worked on Windows for a long time, but this is a story actually about Internet Explorer.
Okay.
So he was involved in IE9, and he was one of the people that was behind the whole Dr. Watson, like that heavy instrumentation system before the cloud and all that sort of stuff.
Sure.
And they were instrumenting the snot out of IE, trying to figure out what they needed to build next. And so they're looking at actual utilization. And this was one of those gatherings at Redmond for the quote unquote influencers, right? The VPs, types like that. Yeah. So there's a couple hundred of us in there, and he's, doing this sort of ask me anything. We're talking about this. And he says, how many people in this room use bookmarks? Now, the whole room put up its hand.
Hang on. Chat room, let's get you to chime in here for a minute. How many of you use bookmarks? Can you drop a 1 in the chat room if you use bookmarks in your browser?
Yeah.
I don't care what browser you're using. Do you use bookmarks, favorites, whatever it's called?
Yeah, they're called favorites,
Ruddle with 2. 0. Yeah, see, this happens on Twitch. They just...
Yeah, the instructions. Yeah, bookmarks, or and honestly, the joke, of course, is like literally this weekend I was sorting my bookmarks out again. Like I was deleting dead ones and sort of correlating some stuff like that. And then he shows us the telemetry for IE8, and 2% of the users of IE8 use bookmarks at all.
Wow.
98% use them not at all.
Wow.
And yet here was a whole room of people using them. It's like, this is what I mean by confirmation bias.
Yes, you're talking to just the people who are confirming.
Yes. And so, the point he made was, how much work do you think I should put into bookmarks for this team with all the features we need to build? Yeah. And the answer was none. Right? He literally, if you go back and look at from IE8 to IE9, the bookmark engine is exactly the same, because it was enough for the 2% of us that were using it. Sure, there were things we wanted in it, but it was not important. And this is the problem when we survey our influencers, when we do the face-to-face stuff, because we only touch a certain number. Telemetry, we're talking about a much larger set of data. We have a much better chance of actually getting an overall sense of the picture of what features people are using.
Oh, yeah. So, friends, you out there in the chat room, not you, your friend sitting there next to you, sign up for Twitch, join us, break out your phone, turn on your Xbox, your PlayStation. You can put us on the big screen and you can watch, you can follow along. We're always happy to take your questions, and you might see your chat message appear right here between Richard and myself as we're going along. And when we bring our guest on later, we want to hear from you. We want to talk to, we're talking about Debugger today, and we want to be able to reflect those questions because other people who can make product decisions are listening. And if questions come up that are compelling, or something that they've been hearing, they may want to reach back and talk to you and figure out what those next steps are, because hearing from people is just the first step towards then inspecting and figuring out metrics and numbers.
It's one of the things I like doing at DEVIntersection. I do a lot of the content planning, work closely with you and with other Microsoft folks. I love that we have engineers there, and that you can often have a conversation literally with the person who helped build the product. And I'm good. You and I have this conversation all the time. I just don't know that other people realize it. It's like, I work really hard to make sure that we're getting the engineers to do sessions that explain why things work the way they work.
Yeah, it's one thing to see
that's qualified to explain it.
It's one thing to see the how.
Yeah.
Anybody can see the how. You can find a YouTube video that'll show you the how. You can read the documentation. You want to see the how. You want to learn the why. You want to be able to actually ask some of the folks who are responsible for building that thing, building the debugger. The woman who leads the development and the interactions with the debugger is going to join us here in just a few minutes. Mm-hmm. Be able to ask those questions about, hey, I don't understand why this works this way.
Right.
So valuable.
There's always that laugh, right? When you talk, why doesn't it just do this?
Yeah.
You'll see the chuckle. It's like, which is really the implied, do you know how many months we've tried to make it do that? There are hard things behind the scenes, and they're usually pretty comfortable sharing those things too with the folks that actually care about that. They've got the same problem that all of us have as software developers, which is they're deeply invested in this very specific aspect of this stack of products, and they love talking about it. They get a chance. It just also used to being the only one in the room that cares about all those details.
Oh yeah,
you care about them. They're excited to talk to you about it. You can talk over lunch about it. You can catch them after a session.
Absolutely. Fuel Snable has a very good point here about telemetry. The most important telemetry for their career is, does my manager use bookmarks? You're not wrong.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a very good point to learn.
Well, yeah, it depends on what hold they have over you there. But where it's interesting to see. And I coined this term when I was working as an architect, right? CTO features,
Yes.
right? Like, wait, why did we suddenly, in enterprise, have to embrace tablets, make sure that our web pages rendered well on tablets, and so forth? Because CTOs tended to show up with iPads.
Yeah. Hey, I was out at Best Buy over lunch, and check out this cool iPad I got. Why doesn't our application work on this?
Yeah, I'm expecting all my reports to be viewed beautifully on this from now on. You'll take care of that for me, will you? Right? Yeah. Okay. There's a CTO feature for you.
D&I Stream chimes in with, why is the most important question in almost every aspect of life. You're not wrong. And at the Dev Intersection event, at other streams like this one, you're going to have your chance to talk to these folks. It's even better when you talk to them in person.
Well, and we're also on the Disney grounds, so one of the answers to why may be Star Wars.
Yes.
And on Wednesday, we're knocking off a little bit early because we've got a set of passes, so everybody there is going to get to go in, and I think we're all going to rush the Star Wars space at Disney World and see if we can all get ourselves a lightsaber.
So, okay, a couple things. We were at Ignite together back in September and November. I'm sorry.
It's going to be September this year.
So Ignite was in Orlando, and I got there an extra day early. I was supposed to be setting some things up, but that was canceled. So I had an extra day, and I went with some of our Twitch friends over, and I got to go to Star Wars, the Galaxy's Edge area.
It's way too much fun.
When you walk down that hill towards where the Millennium Falcon is, and it just appears from behind the other buildings, and it's there.
It's chilling.
Yes, right. As a child of the 70s, to see it there, it's like, I can't believe it. It's the Millennium Falcon, right? As a sci-fi
my 10-year-old self just goes, "Yep, there you are."
So, if you do want to make your own lightsaber, right? They have ones modeled after all the characters in the movies, right? All the ones that you've seen that a major character carried. They're there for you to buy. I might have a purple Mace Windu one right on the other side of this green screen.
How would that happen? I can't imagine.
If you want to make your own one, book your appointment now. They book up months in advance. Yeah. So
it's very, very popular. Right?
It's extremely popular, and I've been told that the presentation, it's an entire show of how you assemble the lightsaber at the park. It is amazing.
I've also been notified by the powers that be that we're just about out of rooms in the Swan. Yeah.
Are you kidding?
Yeah, no, we filled the place. It's normal for the spring show to overflow to a couple of hotels, but we're not there. It's only February, right? So we're not quite. But if you still want to, the nice thing about staying in the Swan is you can literally take a boat to Disney, like to go for dinner. There's docks at the hotel, and you just go in. You can go onto the site, get some dinner, come back. It's not a big deal. Like, you don't have to do the day at Disney thing.
Yeah.
And your room key is your pass.
That's right. It feels like we live in the future when your key is your pass into all those different parks and things. Really is something. Let me see. Just taking a look at some of the questions, the comments coming from chat. Oh, is this one of our friends, D3 Denise? Is that right?
It might be. I'm not sure.
The comment, I'm not sure. I think it is. That looks like one of our Dev Intersection colleagues. Yes, it is. Okay. So Denise is pointing out, make sure you register.
Responsible for all the artwork too, right? So
all this.
It's that.
Yeah.
So that's Denise.
Register by March 20. Get that ticket ticket for free. That's the ticket
onto Disney.
Onto Disney grounds. Do it. That's so cool. Hey, you were mentioning about CTO features. FuelSnable wants to highlight venture capitalist features as well.
The worst. And I've sat in both seats, right? Okay. I have been the CTO being told by the investor, you really should do this, and I've been the investor saying, you should really do this. And in both cases, neither happened.
Makes it real easy to decide whether or not to continue.
No. Sometimes they come back with real data and push back. And if
Oh,
you're
that's
smart, you're trying to be successful here. Just because you like the feature doesn't mean you're the customer.
good. CMO features similarly, right?
Yeah, I don't know.
Marketing thinks this would be a great idea.
Yeah, marketing thinks a lot of things.
Yeah, keep thinking.
They're necessary. They're very necessary.
So
selling is important too, right?
Selling and shipping a product. Oh my goodness.
I pushed you over Leslie's info, so if you want to loop her in, she should be available.
Fantastic. In Skype?
In email?
In email. Oh, that's why I don't see it over here. Aha!
I'll put it in Skype if you want.
Yeah, Skype would be easier.
I got to get my email.
Well, now I've got email open.
Race you.
I'm waiting for the circle of patience to continue spinning.
Hey, my office updated today.
Oh, no. Let's see.
1909 on this machine now. I'm keep waiting to see what weird things happen to it.
So I have a cumulative update from 2020 that's waiting to be installed on this one, and it's like,
you don't need your machine for a day.
Right.
I finished my 1909 patch on my Surface Book 2, which is as hot a machine as you're going to get, right? And after the patch is finished, it's a couple of hours of the fan running.
Yes.
Like, just because it says the patch is finished doesn't mean the patch is finished.
Don't do that to me. Oh my goodness. Here we go. Leslie Richardson. There we go. I think that's our Leslie Richardson. Let's see if we can get her added into the call. And I'm hearing things.
That was a bonk.
There we go.
Hi.
Hey, Leslie, there we go.
Ta-da!
And you should see our combined video coming back. There she is. Let me get the final pieces connected here, and we'll put your camera onto the screen.
All right.
And there, this one. All right. And yeah, there we go. Welcome on. There's Leslie Richardson. Hello, hello.
Hello.
So good to see you, my friend. Welcome in. Do you want to give folks a quick intro who you are before we...
Yeah, absolutely.
Already told you your magic. You just have to tell us how you're magic.
Cool. So my name is Leslie Richardson. I'm a program manager on the Visual Studio debugging team. So yeah, I focus on debugging people's problems all day.
Fixing people's debugger. Yeah.
Debugging the debugger? Is that the job?
Yeah, that's the job.
So there's definitely something to be said about all the cool things that the debugger, right? There's a ton of new features that have been added to it in 2019, and I've been seeing you at the various events as the features are added, as they're improved, and we continue to invest. We continue to see Microsoft build and make debugging easier for folks. Uh-oh, did I lose her?
Yeah, I think so. I think Skype just did its clever thing.
Uh-oh. She turned into the Skype logo. There we go.
Little bonk.
Are we back? There we go.
I think so.
Awesome. So I was saying the Microsoft team continues to invest, continues to see cool new things happening in Visual Studio 2019 to make debugging easier, better, faster for folks. Can you talk a little bit about some of the things that have been happening here in Visual Studio?
Yeah, so the faster part, most definitely, that's something that I think across the VS team in general, we've been working on improving. For debugging, for instance, we've made stepping a lot faster. For C++ specifically, if you have those large applications where you've experienced those fun memory crashes, improved that a lot in 2019 to make it so that you get less of those.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, that's been exciting. I know just internally, even when we gave a shout out to like the Xbox team and a couple other teams who've been experiencing those high memory concerns, we told them, hey, if you swap to 2019, then you might not have those issues nearly as much. And the response has been pretty good in terms of adoption of 2019, just from that feature alone.
It's always going to be a good day when an internal team loves your product too, right? I mean, I know out they all love you, but the Xbox guys are tough. Like those
Yeah,
they're hard problem.
They're a tough sell.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So, I mean, okay, C++, right, improving the debugger there, that is huge for like you mentioned, game developers, the folks that are building the native features. I'm a .NET developer, right? Big
Right.
things are happening for us in the debugger as well, right? Please?
Absolutely, yeah. .NET, it's got it going on. So we've introduced all kinds of features like pinnable properties, and on the profiling side, if you've ever felt the need to look at, how objects are being allocated or garbage collected, because all that happens behind the scenes, and they kind of expect you to not care, but there might be instances where you do. Then
yes,
you just,
need to care.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then you can use that object allocation tool, which will let you see like what kinds of objects are being stored somewhere and which ones are being garbage collected and at what times, that sort of thing. And of course, on the production diagnostic space, we're making progress in our time travel debugging and snapshot debugging, which allows you to debug your issues that are going on in your web applications at runtime while they're out in the broad daylight for all your customers and users to see and use at the same time.
We did a show a little while ago on time travel debugging. You got to explain it again, Leslie. It's because it doesn't seem real what you described. So
I know, it's like what?
Well,
I think when I heard about it.
Let me preface a little bit. Is there something that you can show that might be a little bit easier? You can share your screen here over Skype, and I can put it up on the video for folks to be able to see.
Yeah, I don't have a demo for time travel debugging, but for the profiling stuff and all that jazz, I can definitely show some of that.
Okay.
Cool. So I can explain what time travel debugging is first, and then we can like pivot.
Sure.
Some other stuff. Cool. Yeah. So imagine that you just finished your project. It's great. You have this web app. It's good to go. You went ahead and published it on Azure or wherever, and it's out in the open. Users are using it. But then you start to notice that there's some bugs going on that only occurred within production. Like it seemed to be working fine, but once you scale it and do all these other things to it, then
the users get a hold of it and do the weird stuff we never thought of.
Right. I was like, what did you do? Like everything was perfect. Why? Yeah, like seriously? So, one way you can address this issue is just if you were to remote debug it normally, it might be frozen on the user's end. So the user could be playing around with the app and all of a sudden things aren't working and it's like it's frozen in time. So great, I don't know what's going on. As a user, I don't really care about what bugs are currently going on in the back that aren't necessarily affecting me. So first, I got to talk about snapshot debugging, and that's the first leg of this time travel debugging process. So you can use snapshot debugging, which will allow you to take a snapshot or save the state of your application as it's still running in production and be able to debug your issue through that trace, essentially. And then from there, you can use time travel debugging, which adds the ability to let you actually step through what it is that you're seeing. So with snapshot debugging, normally you take that snapshot and you can set a breakpoint that's the equivalent for snapshot debugging, but we call it a snap point. And from there, you can see the state of your application at that given point in time. But in order to step from there, like through the rest of a method, for instance, then you can use time travel debugging, which will allow you to go forwards and backwards. So back in time and forwards, yeah, in order to see the issue.
Mr. Magoo is complimenting, saying time travel debugging is majorly cool.
Oh, cool.
I kind of agree. Thank you, Mr. Magoo.
Yep. That is majorly awesome. Thanks for that. Yeah, so that is still a work in progress. We're also adding async functionality to it as of late, so that's exciting.
Now, I want to also hand over a similar question about time travel debugging, stuff that's out there and released. Does that mean you're able to debug .NET code that's been JITted and in release mode, but running out on Azure?
Yeah, that should be possible. That's something that I'd have to double check from the JITted standpoint, but if currently, I believe it works for Azure VMs and so anything running on Azure VM. Cool. And oh gosh, the one other that I'm blanking on, but Azure VMs are definite yes. So
okay. Very cool stuff to hear and know, different ways that right those places that you do want to participate with folks and actually be able to fix production is a big thing. Now, Debugger also works across one of my favorite new features, Live Share.
Yeah.
Now, right, that's kind of intense, pushing the debugger across the wire, so other folks, not even using Visual Studio 2019, maybe they're using Visual Studio Code, are able to interact with that. Can you speak a little bit about what's going on there and some of the cool things we're seeing with that?
Yeah, so it's pretty cool. There's might be plenty of times where you're trying to figure out a bug in your code, and having to go back and forth between the other user can be kind of complicated if you're not using something like Live Share, where you're either looking at the other person's screen, or you have to wait for one person who's maybe hosting initially the Live Share to do all their action, place their breakpoints accordingly and stuff. But what's great about the new developments that we've made is that either party can set a breakpoint on their side. The other viewers can still see it, and then you can run the application and see that same debugging experience on no matter where you're at. So whether it's on code, you can see the related debugging things that code has, or if you're running NBS proper, then you can see watch window and all this other stuff that the other user who may have placed that breakpoint initially is interacting with, and you can see them step and all that jazz, which is exciting.
It's so powerful because an example that I've seen some folks do is, as a developer, I'm going to be talking to my QA folks, my quality assurance folks, or to somebody who's found an issue, and I'll ask them to connect into a Live Share session. And because it pops both browsers or both applications on both machines, they can actually step through and reproduce the problem, and I can set a breakpoint. So now I'm not doing time travel debugging. I'm over Live Share, actually attached to exactly what they're seeing and doing.
Yeah, exactly. And
That's
it's great
intense.
Because, yeah, I agree. Especially because with Live Share, you don't have to make sure you install all the other packages and environment stuff that the other user has on their end, which takes some time too. And if it's just a tiny bug that you're looking at, it's seriously, I got to go through all these hoops just to it's one issue. It's one line of code.
Yeah, what I haven't seen yet in the workplace was that the QA to dev dynamic on something like that, where QA produces a behavior they don't recognize before and can pull in the developer responsible and have them be able to see that. That's, to me, is really interesting. We keep thinking about dev to dev. We're trying to solve a hard problem, as opposed to that sort of more formal enterprise flow where now QA's got this instance that they're working on. They're doing some deeper level integration tests. They run into something weird, and then just to be able to get the dev right to that point to see what they're seeing without, and again, eliminating all those cannot reproduce replies in sort of traditional bug fixing, right? Build a ticket, cannot reproduce, try again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now, there's new features around, I believe they're called trace points and conditional breakpoints that will help make that type of interaction a little bit easier for me as the developer, so I'm not stopping every time you go through a loop, right? I can set up and log, and there's some really neat interactions that you've shown recently that are being added to Visual Studio.
Absolutely. So breakpoints are always something that we're trying to improve, as we speak regarding trace points. We're working on creating a new entry point experience and just overall better way for people to even discover them, because trace points, which allow you to essentially do console.log print lines of code without actually having to write code, if you don't want to spam your code with all of that, it's a really nifty feature that a lot of people could definitely use in their everyday debugging experience that is just not as discoverable as it could be. So that is definitely something that we are working on improving. And of course, and for 2019 especially, we've added things such as data breakpoints for the .NET users out there. That's been a C++ staple for a bit, but there were some .NET users who would have liked to see it too. So now that is here as well, which is cool.
Oh, very cool. Yeah. Now, there's a question, actually it's more of a comment here in the chat room, from, this is SMF723, says that, gosh, when you're in that Live Share scenario, it'd be great if QA had the ability to snapshot and do that type of snapshot debugging on what their interactions are. That's an interesting comment.
I agree. I will share that with production diagnostics team, because if they're not already thinking about it, which I feel like they are, then that's definitely something.
That strikes me as that's the asynchronous workflow, right? Where a QA working at their time hits this particular problem, uses snapshot recorder, then to push it back to dev, for tomorrow.
Yeah.
As opposed to the synchronous flow, which is interrupt dev before they get into the next thing and say, hey, we're looking at your code, right? We're dealing with a problem right now that looks like your code. Can you help us?
Yeah. Or even with TTD, they can like share a trace with us of that issue, and then we can use TTD on our end. So like just step back and forth through whatever issue they were currently experiencing.
TTD, time travel debugging?
Time travel debugging, sorry.
There we go.
Acronyms are a plague.
But I also appreciate there are different workflows in different scenarios, right?
Yes.
That QA might be in a different time zone and they're working at their time, and just the ability to create those snapshot recordings that can then be played and manipulated by the devs at a different time versus the sort of real. I mean, I love the real time thing, and I think live share is awesome. And I'm really big on making sure developers aren't digging into the next thing while the previous thing is still in their head that needs to be fixed. Like the sooner we can get through a test cycle and quickly show there's a problem, they had enough time to get a coffee, but nothing more.
Right. It's like, darn it, really? Like that was my excuse to go for that mile-long walk, and you know.
But my bigger concern is you get working on the next problem, and it doesn't take very long before you really have no relationship with the code you built, because you're up to the next problem, and the time to fix is so short if it's still in your head. Picking it back up takes longer than actually fixing it. So everything I can do to shorten those cycles and get folks directly involved in the fixes, the less time, the shorter the time to fix is.
I agree. Yeah, you got that momentum going, and then you lose it when something's taking a long time to figure out, and you got to go get your coffee and whatever, and come back. It's just like, what was my train?
I'm never going to stop someone from raising their caffeine levels. That's fundamentally we are turning caffeine into code here.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's working on the next problem that gets me worried, because then they're immersed in that, and that a new problem is always more fun than an old problem too, especially when you don't think the old problem is a problem anymore because you think you solved it. And we're here to tell you, nope, you haven't solved it yet.
Yeah, gosh. Now, right, you and the team have been building these features to help make developers a lot more productive, get them in. Get right to those various scenarios as quickly as possible. Do you want to show? Do you want to take a look at some of those on your screen real quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, here we go.
Yeah.
I am going to, it's going to be a little bit fuzzy, but when you share your screen, we'll be able to pick it up, and it'll be here behind us. It'll be a little fuzzy coming back to you. The rest of you out there on Twitch, you'll be able to see this perfectly clear. So the share screen button is still too little. Yeah, there you go. You got it. They didn't put a name with it, right? There is, it's a little bit harder to find. So, waiting for the network. I've got a big old Skype logo. It's coming. It's coming.
Watch those hamsters go.
Oh, Richard, earlier today, so Leslie, you might appreciate this. When I host my Twitch stream, there's all kinds of things folks can do to redeem and get things. Oh, we're back. Folks can redeem and do different things on stream, and they put me into chipmunk hamster voice mode here, and it was just a little crazy for about 5 minutes.
Oh no!
Yeah.
I was so excited about demos that
it took over. There we
go.
And I will transition so everybody can see your Visual Studio there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So everybody can see this.
Crisp. Yeah. Beautiful.
Awesome.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm in 2019. This is the latest version. I think this is 16.5 at this point.
Okay.
And I'm just setting a breakpoint at the start of this application I have. It's a .NET Core web app that displays a list of books that I can either choose to add to my shelf or not. And one of the cool things that we've been working on a lot in Visual Studio 2019 especially is just the watch autos and locals windows. There's so many new tools that we've added to just that window alone that can really help your productivity and just improve your overall debugging environment and customize it the way that you want. So yeah, I'm just going to wait for that breakpoint to hit. We can show some of that off.
Now, while you're waiting for that, a question here from Jonathan. Does the dev team use the debugging tools to debug the debugging tools?
We do. And it's funny because even among our own teammates, we're still learning about stuff, debugging tools that our sister team might be working on. So I think when we launched Pinnable Properties, which I'll demo here, it was kind of exciting because when we showed it to the production diagnostics team and the profiling teams, which are all under the diagnostics tools umbrella, they were really excited to use it too. So that's really great. And we also have something brand new called rethrown exceptions, which I can also demo here. That was exciting for a lot of people, and they discovered it without even realizing it, but it helped them ultimately solve a problem that they were having. So it's yeah, so it's pretty fun just getting to learn about what the team next door to us is doing. And you think, and while there's a lot of cross collaboration on all three of those teams, yeah, it's fun to discover what the other one is doing.
So we've hit a breakpoint.
Yes, we have. So yep, here we are in this function here. And so I have this books variable here, and there's 100 books accordingly. And normally when you view the books, let me actually unpin here to show off. Normally, when you view objects like this, you're just going to see the type of object under the value column, or similarly, if you hover over it to get its data type here, you can just pin it. You can see that same view. And that's not necessarily great if you wanted to track down either one individual item, or maybe you just want to quickly skim through and locate each object by a specific property. So of course, if you already have a book in mind, or if you know exactly what property you want, then you can use the new search tool that's also available in 2019. So I know there's a book in here called Pride and Prejudice somewhere. So let's try doing some of that. And it'll take me to Pride and Prejudice, which is all this stuff. But ideally, it would be nice if you could like quickly identify by type, so, or by a property. So what you can use is this new tool called Pinnable Properties, which just lets you pin whatever property that you essentially want to favorite and see bubbled up to the top of your debugger display. So if I wanted to identify each one by the author, then I can select that pin icon. And as you can see,
nice.
Yeah, now you can just quickly see what each author is for each book object here.
But so Leslie, hang on. I've got really cool debugger display attributes sprinkled throughout my domain objects here so that I can get that same feature.
Yeah, are you referring to this?
Yeah, that!
Thing yeah. Yep, so we've had this for a while, and the story about how we got to Pinnable Properties was because a lot of people didn't know about this. Like, I gotta ask, how did you find out about debugger display?
I got annoyed with seeing the same, like you were just showing, I got annoyed with seeing, you know, the parentheses and here's the object type defined inside. I was like, there's got to be a better way to do this, because when I look at these types that Microsoft has written and makes available, it has better text there. So I went and I did the research, because that's the kind of geek I am. I want to go and figure out if they made this work, I can do the same thing.
Sure. Cool. Yeah, so for you, that's great. And it's really cool that you went and managed to find this really nifty feature on your own. But for a lot of people, just a lot of people were unaware of it. So I would demo this at previous talks that I've done, and a lot of people would ask me afterward, like, is this a 2019 exclusive? And I have to say, no, it's been there longer than I have. So.
It's the first time Jonathan's seen this attribute. Look at that there in the chat room. And
oh, cool.
And Hugo says, well, just override to string.
Right, so that is definitely an option that you can do, but if you want to have that distinction between strings that are being displayed in your web app proper, or whatever application you have, versus things that you just want to see as you're debugging, like in the watch window or in a data tip, then using something like Pinnable Properties or Debugger Display is the better choice.
Fantastic. You don't have to change your code or somebody else's code.
Right, exactly. You don't have to modify code to use this. You don't have to worry about whatever syntax is required for this. As you can see, you got to remember some brackets and curly braces and then the title name. And there's all these other things you can do with debugger display that you can make it as advanced or simplistic as you want from that point once you're aware of it. And the equivalent feature is NatViz in C++. But yeah. But ultimately, neither of these tools felt very discoverable, yet the demand for it seemed to be pretty high whenever I would show either of those off. So we figured, why not just make a better entry point for it and be able to actually use that immediately at runtime. So that's the other big plus to pinnable properties. So like this, you need to stop coding. If you didn't plan ahead already, you'd have to stop debugging and then add this code and then restart your session and then see it in action.
Yeah.
But with pins, you can just pin on and off. You can filter them out if you want, and pretty simplistic.
That's great that you can pin multiples.
Yeah.
You can pin multiples, and if you wanted to view the name of the property, then you can select this little icon. Or if you only care about seeing those pin properties, then you can also hit the filter icon, and you'll see just the properties that you pinned displayed when you expand out.
Oh, man. I was going to say Musical Bookworm has a comment about where they learned debugger display. They didn't know it existed until they saw Leslie Richardson mention it at .NET Conf.
Yay! Oh, awesome. That's so great.
So there you go.
Awesome shout out. And I love your username, by the way. That's fantastic. Musical Bookworm.
Let me see here. All right. So, I mean, that's great. You can do that in the watch. I'm assuming you can do the same thing in the locals and
yes.
autos as well.
Yeah, same thing. You can see this in locals and autos windows. And not only that, but these pins will persist across multiple debugging sessions. So you can close out of this session. If I hit stop and restarted, then you could see those same pins there until you decide to unpin it. And of course, you can also see that in your data tip. Click on it. Yeah. So.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Same experience.
Well, you're taking my hint that these two values are properties are important to me, and making sure they show up everywhere now that I've selected them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I personally use it all the time whenever I'm coding something. It's just really nice to have, and it saves me a lot of time of having to remember the order of things or where certain objects were in that sort of thing.
No. You're trying to figure out the behavior of a particular collection. It's like, well, let me know when this thing shows up.
Right.
Now, you mentioned they persist across debugging sessions. Does that also persist when I close Visual Studio and come back next time for this project?
Yeah. So part of the reason why I had to unpin right before I showed that demo was because I had pinned that earlier and forgot to unpin it. And then I closed this out and opened it back up earlier this morning. And it was still there. So
now the follow-up question, we're showing C# here. Fuel Snable wants to know, well, what about an F#?
F#. I believe it works in F#. I haven't actually tried, but yes, that should be a thing. And if it's not, definitely let me know, because that is something that we should totally add, especially because we just added it for C++ recently. It's great. But for most managed code, this should be an applicable.
That's another strength of you doing this in the watch window versus in code windows too, because code windows are always a little more subjective depending on the language. Where the watch window, you're in Studio, that's where this lives.
Yep, exactly. It's like, do what you want. So that's really cool. And of course, we have old staples, which to a lot of people are also considered new tools in and of themselves, just because. One of the biggest issues we have on our team in particular is just how do we make our existing tools, which are already pretty sweet, more discoverable. That's why we came up with like pinnable properties, because everyone likes debugger display once they learn about it, but you got to learn about it first. So for instance, what I can do, did you know you can drag your execution pointer back and forth if you want to go and re-inspect an object again, for instance?
I knew that was run to, but you can go back?
Yeah, so you have run to click, which is one option. And let's say if I had a breakpoint at the start of this function, but I wanted to just quickly fast forward to the bottom of it, then you can hover over and you'll get this green glyph icon that appears. And from there, you can run your execution up to that given line, which is really nice. So like having a fast forward button on a remote control.
Now, that kind of feeds, before you go into going backwards, that kind of feeds into Boom Boom's question here from the chat room. Is there a lightweight way then to keep track of the execution timing for that function? Some sort of function attribute middleware? Is there a glyph that might appear that we can see there?
Oh, see, like how long it took to execute, given a point. Yeah. So if you have Enterprise, I believe you can step or run to click or whatever, and you can use some profiling tool action where either on the side of the line. So let me see if I can't drag and step and see if this works. Yeah, so you can see on the side here, it's inline. It'll tell you how many milliseconds elapsed from one line to another. And if you wanted more detailed information, you can click on it and we'll open up the Diagnostics tools window. It's that window that you might have found yourself closing from time to time, but if you're interested in, yeah, but if you want to see, no, never, of course not.
That is really cool.
Yeah,
oh my
so
gosh.
If you want to see some quick profiling info like CPU usage or how long it took, in this case, to execute a line of code. And yeah, so that's pretty nifty. And what's also great about it, one of my favorite pieces about it is the events tab. Let me move this window so it's a bit more.
Actually, you can close that little Skype window. It won't affect you.
Great. Yeah, I saw it and I was like, I don't know, do this. All right. Yeah, so one of my favorite parts of this window is the events tab here. So it's logging all the information that I'm doing here. So it's pretty neat, especially when I step around or experience an exception or use a trace point. Like, for instance, if you are placing a trace point somewhere and normally its result would show up in the output window, but there's already a lot going on in the output window, right? Mm-hmm. So another way that you can view it is by going into events and you can filter events. So if I were to type in trace point, you can see all the trace points. Or in this case, if you just wanted to see all the times that you stepped, then you can do that as well, which is cool. So yeah, but going back to the whole run to click thing. So run to click lets you fast forward through your code. But if you wanted to go back and reinspect an object, there's two ways you can do it. If you just want to go and quickly see something again, then you can actually just drag your execution pointer up to a line of code that you want to go to and see everything back at that line again. So this is great, but it's not the same as step back, which I can show off in a minute as well, because you are essentially just choosing what line of code you want executed next. You're not pretending like all the stuff you just executed never happened.
Right.
So, yeah. So
that if you were actually reversing all that, the book collection should be empty now.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, that would be what would happen if you're doing a traditional step back. But
right.
In this case, my list is already filled up, so it could either double up or do some weird action, depending on where else I decide to place this execution pointer, and then run that line of code afterwards. So it could easily corrupt whatever's going on in your code, which would require you to restart your application anyway. But it's nice if you just want to do nifty double checks on things that you might have stepped over recently and you don't want to have to restart your entire session to see it.
Less of this, start in step mode or run to a breakpoint, I stepped too far, stop, do it again. Just pull it back.
Yeah. So this is really great. And from there, going back to the hidden secrets of the autos, locals, and watch windows, I don't know if you've ever seen this magnifying glass icon that's on the side here, but it's
hidden secrets?
Oh, I'm sorry?
Hidden secrets. Do tell, Leslie. Do tell.
Yes. So a lot of people think this is search related, and in our part, I think this is an icon we should definitely change because I would think it would be search related as well.
But the tool that says text visualizer, that's clearly something else.
Yeah, exactly. So in this case, we have like this JSON variable here, and it's written in JSON. But if you were to hover over it or see it, it clips off the page, and the formatting is all wrong, and this is not very readable as is. So
Make the formatting go away.
I know, like, this is unacceptable.
Yeah.
I mean, a bunch of lines and everywhere and everything. It's not great. So instead, we can use a visualizer, and you can select from a couple defaults, and you can also make your own visualizer using either dataset or other methods. And so, for instance, if I wanted to see it in its proper JSON format, you can click on it, and you get a lot more presentable view of that same long string, which is really nice.
Yeah, that's very nice.
Yeah, so that's cool. You can also just use traditional text visualizer.
For visualizer, exactly. That's a good question.
Oh, what was the question?
I'd say what would be the right icon for a visualizer?
Oh, that is a great question. Honestly, like one of the things that we are thinking about changing is like the icon that's here for pinnable properties. Maybe we should just move the letter A to where this magnifying glass is. I mean, it's text related. But
Yeah, sunglasses.
It's a great
It
problem,
just looks
right?
cool.
Because when I see that letter A up on the bar, I think font size.
Same. Yeah, that's what you see in Word and stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah, icons are no joke. Shout out to the UX team for
Such a hard problem.
Yeah, it's so hard.
So some of the folks in
these icons magic wands because they're all magical, but then we would one from the other.
The folks in chat are chiming in and saying, "What? There's no TOML visualizer
no,
or YAML."
Yeah.
Please.
So table visualizer is definitely something that's been on our radar for a while. It's something I personally want because I like viewing arrays and stuff in tabular form.
Yes.
And like a traditional tree view. I think it's a bit more legible that way.
So Hugo is asking, I think to kind of that point, is it possible to write custom visualizers to extend Visual Studio?
Yes, you can. So the one I'm most aware of is Dataset Visualizer, which has a built-in library and stuff already, and will allow you to create essentially tables. So it's more of a table visualizer, but it's one that you have to manually code up and stuff. And there are other options that exist, but I'm not completely aware of them off the top of my head. But the ability to customize your own tables and stuff is definitely there.
Cool.
Yeah, so that is one cool thing. Another cool thing in the Autos Watch and Locals window. It's amazing how much you can pack in just a small space.
Oh
yeah.
Yeah, so another one, I can pivot a little bit and talk about exceptions, actually, because everyone loves exceptions. And we actually have a new tool that we can use with exceptions.
Let me just pause you for a second because FuelSnable has an interesting suggestion for the Autos, Locals, and Watch window. Wouldn't it be neat if we could, say, right-click, open text in a new window, or open in Notepad?
Ooh, so you're saying like if I selected the JSON value, there could be like one of the options to just open in Notepad or open in Word or whatever your default. Yeah. Yeah, that's cool.
That's
I like
a cool
that
idea.
Yeah.
I agree. I've gotten similar ideas like that before, except they're more related to breakpoints. Like people want to be able to export breakpoint locations and that sort of thing into like a spreadsheet or CSV file or something like that. So yeah, that is definitely one to take into note, especially because I mean text, why wouldn't you? So
right. Neat idea. Thank you for the question there, FuelSnable. Very cool.
Yeah, everyone's giving good suggestions and stuff. I like these people.
Yeah. All right.
Awesome. So yeah, you want to see some cool exception action?
Yeah.
All right.
Exceptions are exceptional, aren't they?
Oh,
yes,
please.
they are. Yep. And exceptions should be the exception, not the rule.
Depends on who's writing the code.
Right. Cool. So I'm pivoting over to this other application that I have here. This is just this is where we get into some async action on top of that. So if you've ever been using asynchronous code, it can be really cool. It can suit your needs in a lot of good ways, but sometimes there are instances where there's just too much magic going behind the scenes in Visual Studio with this. So trying to debug asynchronous code can be a chore. Like sometimes when you experience, for instance, an exception in your code, you are going to run into instances where the exception gets thrown somewhere, but it doesn't actually tell you the original location where that exception was thrown from, just because async is doing magic behind the scenes and you actually care about what the behind the scenes stuff is.
Oh, yeah.
So now we've added what's called rethrown exceptions, and I'll just run this application real fast. And all it is in this case is I'm calling one async function, which calls another one, which calls another one. And ultimately, an exception is going to get thrown over here because I have a string that's being set to null, and I'm trying to set it to all lowercase letters. So normally, you wouldn't see this new call stack window that is currently displayed in my exception helper that appears once my exception gets unhandled. So in the past, you would just see the no reference exception. Right. And from there, it's just like, okay, well, you know, where is it? Because I'm not seeing anything at this actual line where the exception became unhandled. So this is not very helpful. And then you got to start, you know, backtracking and retracing your steps and trying to figure out where that issue came from.
Hacking your way through weight problems? Nobody's ever done that.
No, of course not. Absolutely not. When would you ever do that? And the amazing time that is having to debug your code.
This is my direct reference to the old sorry joke, right? From a version of BASIC that only had 3 error messages: what, how, and sorry. And every null reference exception, you know, object reference not found, it's essentially sorry.
Wow. Sorry, not sorry.
I have no help for you. You've just failed. Thanks for playing.
Sorry. I feel like sorry is my least favorite word to see in an IDE. Sometimes it's just like, sorry about that.
Yeah. Sorry.
This doesn't help me at all, but thanks. So, yeah. So now with this new rethrown exception functionality, whenever you're dealing with async code like this, where there might be an exception being thrown within another location or you have like an inner exception being thrown somewhere, then it will show you the original call stack, which is extremely useful in this case because it can help you narrow down where this exception was actually thrown from. So in this case, if I just click at the top here, it will highlight this return value, and lo and behold, this is the exact line where that exception was originally thrown from.
You did say in the dialogue it was .c, so you know you already had a hint where you were going to go, but I love that you just click on it. It took you there.
Yes, yeah. So you can either click on it or you can just view the call stack like you normally would. Either way, it's nice.
Program.c, like that just told you the key thing right there is what
yeah. Totally. So this has been great. This was one of those tools that everyone in my team and production diagnostics and profiling teams have been using like without even realizing it. Somebody mentioned on our team the other day that they were trying to debug an async issue and this call stack came up for them and it was super helpful. So that's exciting. And so in addition to that, since we're still on the topic of exceptions, going back.
Interesting. Hey, can I just ask a question? And I had the similar question, but FuelSnable pointed this out. There's no line numbers shown there.
Ooh, that is a good observation. And I think that's definitely something that's worth adding. I will write that one down, actually. If we're not already planning on adding that, then that's definitely something you should add.
Yeah. To make it a complete call stack. So not just clicking here, but if I copied that out and put it into Notepad or saved it for tracing later, I've got the line numbers with it. That's a great point.
Great idea. Yep. Awesome. So yeah, from there, going back to how can we view exceptions, there might be times where you want to actually view an exception at the exact moment where it was thrown. And so going back to that nifty window that we find ourselves closing from time to time the Diagnostics tools window over here. Under my favorite tab, Events, you'll notice that there's a bunch of exceptions being logged here and stuff. But specifically, there's one up here that has a little camera icon next to it. And this is referencing a snapshot. So kind of like snapshot debugging, once that exception was thrown, Visual Studio took or saved the state of my application at that given time. So if I actually want to travel back to the point where this exception first happened, then I can double click on it and be taken to that same line, which is also an alternative to the rethrown exceptions in this window that we added.
Well, and so it has the real error, not just the reference error and the callback errors and so forth. This is the actual error.
Mm-hmm. So if you wanted to dig deeper into that exception, then this is a really good method to have. And as you can see, you can look at your locals and autos windows and all that jazz like you normally would, except now you're in historical debugging mode. So we traveled back in time.
There you go. A little time travel example.
Yeah. Like... Lots of time travel action. So to do that, and of course you can just return to live debugging when you're done with that.
You need a warn not kill grandfather in here.
Yeah, so that's really cool. And you have to actually turn on snapshots. They should be on by default if you're opening up Visual Studio for the first time. But if you turned them off, then I believe you just go to snapshot. Or no, it's part of IntelliTrace, my bad. So I love this universal search tool. Let me tell you,
same thing. It's like, what? I don't have to navigate 14 menus,
right?
What?
It's like, I don't know where anything is. It's so great. Exactly. The thing is so great. If you're not using that search tool, use it because it's amazing. Yeah, so here we go. So first thing you need to do is you're going to have to enable IntelliTrace if you're an enterprise user. And from there, you have a couple options. So if you want to do full-on snapshots and stuff, then you check this one. Otherwise, I believe events only might be the one that's on by default. But otherwise, you should have IntelliTrace on because it can give you some cool stuff and allows you to travel back in time and do step back action, which actually does allow you to do a traditional step back instead of just changing your execution pointer to whatever line you want to execute next.
Right.
And yeah, so that's pretty cool. Also, given that exceptions are sadly a thing that exists, there may be times where you don't care about specific exceptions. Like if you, for some reason, didn't want to stop your code the moment you see a null reference exception for whatever reason, then you can go into exception settings and locate that particular exception, and then you can just choose to check it or not check it. So if you have an exception checked, then the next time that exception happens, your code will immediately halt at that given location where it was thrown from. So this is really nice if you want to just pick and choose what exceptions you care about and which ones you don't.
Right. It sounds like a tool you'd use when you're narrowing down a particular problem.
Yes. Yeah, so it's really great for filtering purposes and all that.
This was a question earlier, but when you start doing this fine dialing in and checking and unchecking things, I'm wondering if you get to a place where you lose track of all the settings you've made. Like, is there a way to sort of get back to the base setting mode where catch everything?
Yeah, we got restore the list to the default settings. So
right.
By default, Visual Studio traditionally checks the most common exceptions that people care about. So like null reference and other traditional runtime things that you might be seeing.
And I appreciate that it persists it even when I open and close and come back into it, because that just saves me time when I'm still working on the same problem. So I do think the reset's super important.
I totally agree. I've used it a couple times because I'm like, I don't remember what I was doing.
What pins I put in and any of that stuff. And I'm working on the next problem. I'm like, I don't want any of that now.
Exactly. Yeah, so this is a great button to have. So if you've been playing around with exceptions, just use this button. It's good.
Awesome. That's what I need to go, Leslie. I'm happy.
Awesome.
right? There's something to be said about the searchability, the accessibility and discoverability of things, whether it's the search here for exception settings, the search over in the autos, locals, and watch windows. And folks have been learning and picking up on this. Webface here says, love the universal search. I learned it from some guy named C# Fritz. I don't know who that is. But there's...
Never heard of it.
Right? It's really made the tool a lot more accessible than just hitting F1 and trying to figure out in the help dialog, how do I do this thing?
It's also about not punishing us for the level of options that exists in a product, right? It's a complicated product. There's a lot there. These are all tools that help us avoid that. It's like, I can get to the thing I want. I don't have to navigate your crazy hierarchical tree.
Definitely. Like, one of the biggest complaints that we get across the board in VS is just, it's so overwhelming. Like, there's so many cool tools, but there's a lot going on, and it can be really scary opening this IDE for the first time. Like, I never used Visual Studio until I started this job on the debugger team, and opening it up for the first time as a former student, I was like, oh my gosh, really? And I'm expected to learn all this?
It's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Marcus points out, if you can only remember a little bit of what you're looking for, it's ideal to search and filter.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree, and I use it seriously all the time. Like, there's several debugging things where I forget where you set them at, and I just use search. So good.
Even then, you did search twice. You searched on Snapshot once and went, oh no, wait, this is actually an IntelliTrace feature. Search for IntelliTrace.
Right. Yeah, so good.
That's better than navigating 2 trees worth of menus.
Definitely. And I think nowadays you can search through code, I believe. Or it's getting there if we're not there yet, but that's on the roadmap.
Control comma will do that.
Oh yeah, definitely control comma. But within the universal search, I think they're trying to add.
Oh, yes, they're trying to add other places you can search too, like GitHub.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I have one more, not demo, but like one more new feature that I can share.
Okay.
If you're interested.
Oh, please.
Yeah, so I think last update that we've done, we added the ability to attach to processes running on Linux Docker containers. So going back to my reading app here, let's see, I believe I have Docker running. No, I do not. So if you have a Linux or Windows Docker container, because we just added that stuff as well, what's cool is that, actually, if I just swap that. If you go into debug and then attach to process, then you'll notice that, so this is the traditional window that you can use if you wanted to attach to whatever process that you want, either remotely or locally. But if you go to connection type, you'll notice that there's 2 new options. So Docker Linux container and Docker Windows container. So either of these is really nice to have if you find yourself needing to debug a process that is running on either kind of those containers. And so, like, for instance, I've made a Docker container containing my reading list application, so I could click on that and then select from the available processes that will hopefully appear in a second, and then I can start debugging it like normal. And for Linux, this applies to both local and remote containers. For Windows, it currently just applies to local containers. But
cool.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that in the background, the output window is showing you that it is firing up the container and stuff. Like,
I love it.
It's visible voodoo instead of secret voodoo.
I agree. I also love, there's a new containers window. My team didn't really do this, but when you're debugging, you can, here we go.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, you can see all your running containers, which is super cool.
I like it. Yeah, 8443. There it is.
Oh, that's very cool.
It's nice.
Yeah, I was added a few updates ago.
Is that a terminal button next to that?
What is this? Yeah, open. Oh, yeah. Oh, that's great.
Oh, you're sitting in there. You're in the container now.
Yep, that is too cool. My hope for that is like with the new terminal window that we've actually integrated into VS, that you can have the option to open it within the built-in terminal window. I think that would be pretty neat.
Oh, yeah. Now, okay, so we can debug into containers. We've seen how we can debug our applications that are running locally inside of Visual Studio. SMF723 has the killer question, and we're going to put you on the spot here.
Okay.
What about attaching to a Blazor app in WebAssembly?
Woo. Good question. Yeah, so that is tricky. I'm actually not sure of that question. A Blazor app running in WebAssembly. So I guess it would.
So there's. Well, we know that Chrome can do it, right? And which means right now Edge can do it, right? Because there's that whole thing with the Web Tools debugger. But I don't think Visual Studio is set up yet for it, is it?
I don't think we are. I want to say that we're not. That since it's a pretty web heavy ask, we're not quite there yet. If we are, then it's probably baby steps.
Yeah.
No, I was talking to the Blazor team not that long ago, and near the top of their stack was debugging tools. So they're clearly working in that area.
That's awesome. Yeah, then we'll probably be doing some cross collaboration there.
You'll be hearing from them at some point.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'll await their email.
Yes, there's so many good things happening there with that, and certainly the impact that we're going to feel in debugging tools and being able to interact and build those types of new applications better, faster is going to be. It's going to be fun for you.
Yeah, sure will. There's going to be so many things to demo or try to decide to demo. It's like, I don't know what to talk about today.
These are good problems, though.
Yes, they are.
And it is interesting how many features that have been around for a while people still don't know about, and every time you show them, you get that jolt in the room. It's like, where did that come from?
I agree. Doing a talk at Ignite back in, was that October or November?
November.
One of those, yeah. That was my first time that I demoed Pinnable Properties, which we just released at the time. It got a lot of applause.
Yeah. And stand up and clap for a debugger? Like, what?
Yeah, I know, right? Especially since I asked the question at the beginning, like, does anyone actually like debugging? And maybe like 2 hands out of yeah.
I don't like it. You just have to do it.
Yeah.
There's something to be said. Folks have actually, so much is going around and try to avoid the debugger because the debugger for other languages, other tools, and I'm thinking about our friends using JavaScript, it's rough. It's hard to use. They don't have this type of great experience, so they've gone very hard into unit testing and logging tools to compensate for that. And it feels so, gosh, it feels for us that are longtime Visual Studio users, it feels so backwards. Why wouldn't you just use your debugger?
I agree. I think part of it is, honestly, when I first started this job, in college, I was never formally taught how to use a debugger. So at most, I would just do lots of logging and maybe an occasional breakpoint here and there. So coming into the space and being expected to know about the whole debugging suite, I had no idea just how much easier your life could be if you actually do take advantage of some of those tools beyond just a simple breakpoint and print statements everywhere.
Yeah,
so,
and making sense of a dump. Like, there's a lot of things you need to know to really take advantage of all the tooling that's available to you.
I agree. Yeah, and it's like I talk with users all the time and other developers all the time about this, and it's pretty much it's almost universal where it's like there was never really a formal teaching about debugging, and whenever they learned how to code, which is kind of sad.
But it's also tool specific too, right? Like, it's hard. You can't really generalize debugging. It's what's the stack we're working on? What's the tooling we have available to us? What's a great way to look at a problem?
Exactly. And, everyone's using different tools. Everyone has different scenarios. So some things may be applicable and some may not be. Some may be compatible. Some aren't. So, how people find their own workarounds for that sort of thing. It's really tough.
So it sounds like we need to do more debugging sessions at DEVintersection.
I agree. Come debug. That's what you came here for. Just
That's it.
All day, every day debugging.
Yeah.
Favorite thing ever.
Well, one of the most popular videos I ever worked on was an old DNR TV that Carl was doing with Scott Hanselman. And as they were getting set up, we already had the recorder running, the code broke. And it spent a half an hour trying to figure out what the problem was. And that ended up being the video. Because what people loved was, how does Scott Hanselman figure out a problem?
Yeah.
It's a few years ago, so tooling was different, but what he searched on and what tools he looked at, and how he poked through the problem. And I think that's always interesting for folks to work through see the process of working through a problem.
I agree. I think that is pretty riveting. It's like, what's your thought process? Because my thought process is a haphazard mess.
Well, our friend Coding Stocks from the chat room says, so console write line isn't really considered debugging then. Well, that might be your process, but I wouldn't consider that debugging.
It's kind of a logging thing, really, when you're spitting stuff out into the console window.
Yeah.
Like, it's definitely one way to debug your code, but as an alternative, if you don't like to add that line constantly throughout your code, we were talking about trace points earlier. In order to get to it, you have the breakpoint you can set as normal, and then you select the settings icon, and then under actions you can show a message in the output window. So I don't know, I just want to say hello, so this message will print anytime.
Right. You got to write a correct output window, which is, this should never happen.
Right.
I mean, how many times have you seen that message pop up in a piece of software?
Exactly.
Right. My
favorite.
that's a better debugger write line or a console write line. My goodness.
Yeah, so it's super nice to have, and I can probably run this real quick. And yeah, with trace points, you can choose either to stop your code when that gets hit, or choose to continue executing the code when it gets hit, and you can do all this stuff later. So you can treat it as a traditional log, or you can treat it as a breakpoint, either one. But yeah.
Our friend Fuel Snable has a very good point here about all the things that you're showing. Debugging's really hard to teach. Most of their learnings came from real-life incidents and late nights.
Yeah.
That sounds like a really good presentation, a really good Microsoft Learn module, something that we could put together and say, you know what? Let's get you from soup to nuts on debugging here. There's something to that.
I totally agree. That's an idea that I've had for a while. Like, I've wanted to do like a tutorial series of just, here's how do you even think about debugging? Where do you start?
Yeah.
And just do like a beginner series.
Constructing good scenarios.
Yeah.
There's always about, your async away example, Leslie, was perfect because it was simple enough. Because async away is complicated enough that it's like, yeah, I see that problem where error occurred here and it's 3 stacks back, and so now we get a useless message. And being able to get back to the place we need to be is really, really useful.
Exactly.
But you're always balancing that in teaching with enough complexity that feels real, versus too simple.
Definitely. And I think for me, it bugs me as somebody who considers herself beginner, immediate, a lot of times, depending on what the coding scenario is. I get super annoyed whenever I try to watch a video or a talk or something, and it's like the most advanced example that you can come up with in order to talk about a tool or talk about something else. It's just like, oh, I don't know. And like, even sometimes when I'm making demos for talks and stuff myself, I get a little subconscious every once in a while where I'm like, is this too simple? Or like, do people want more advanced? Like,
You know what? DomFX here in the chat is going to offer you a little bit of reassurance here, Leslie. Look at this. Dom says, some of the challenge is even knowing the tools available to help debug. Even just watching this has opened up Dom's eyes to new ways of stepping through code. Thank you, Dom.
That's so exciting. That's like the best response that I can get from somebody after sharing debugging stuff with them. Like, if at least one person can come and take away something new from it and is excited about trying it in their everyday work life, then that is really great for me. Like, I love it.
Actually, and here's a comment. This is from, I want to make sure I pronounce the name correctly. Is it Magus? And kind of interesting take. The best type of debugging is unit testing. Since I started writing tests some years ago, I really don't need to debug that often. Sometimes with user interface stuff, maybe once every few months, there's a problem that you need it for. I think there's definitely a place for both sets of tools. I think this is a really good comment because, right, that unit test is going to make sure that those things you would have needed to debug are ensured and pinned and they work each time. And
I totally agree.
yeah,
I mean, it's like coding smartly so that you run into those debugging issues less. Because I mean, ultimately, you're going to have to debug at some point. But ideally, I find if you were, I mean, test-driven debugging, that's part of why that's so popular and stuff, because, you run into less of those pesky bug issues that you maybe would not have seen had you started writing tests as you code and stuff.
it's like the magic thing that folks don't really appreciate enough that are outside of the Visual Studio environment. They're used to seeing the unit tests run. They go to DevOps. They go to whatever their continuous integration is. But when you can look at that test list in Visual Studio and you can right-click on a test and say, debug just this test.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're talking, right?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, testing is kind of its own little world in Visual Studio, especially. And I know Kendra is like the testing guru on that. But yeah, it's definitely, I think the two can kind of work in tandem. So, when you want to actually go ahead and debug your test, that's one thing. And then when you want to debug the code itself, I think those are two things that should go hand in hand a lot of the time.
Absolutely. Now, you're kind of feeding into and foreshadowing the next one of these that we're going to have on Friday, because Kendra is going to be joining us on Friday. And I think, oh, there we go. We lost Richard briefly. There we go.
I don't know where I went.
No. Skype can be finicky that way.
Internet does internet things.
No, I was thinking Visual Studio said, now I need all the resources.
You're thinking of SQL Server is what you're thinking of, my friend.
Yes, so the SQL Server is the correct. The amount of memory I need is more.
Ah, that's it.
That works with Exchange too.
Oh, I'm sure. So, Leslie, you were starting up another version of Visual Studio over here.
Was.
Well, I can transition back to you now.
All right.
There we go.
Yeah, I was having some technical difficulties, so I figured I'd try restarting.
Fair.
It happens.
Better Visual Studio than Skype.
Oh, it's challenging.
Yeah. So maybe second time's a charm.
And this is the breakpoint with the message, right?
Yes, and I think my issue is I put it on a line where it's not even going to do anything, so that would make sense. Debugging, ladies and gentlemen.
Now you're seeing how the folks who make the debugger debugging.
Yeah.
Put a message on a line that's actually going to run.
Exactly. Let's do a fancy one.
Oh, look at this. All the pieces.
Mm-hmm, all the pieces. And I'm going to need to restart that, but here we go.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah, a lot of these things they're eye-opening, and when you finally put them in use, right? And I look at interacting with the debugger the same way that I think about all the different hotkeys that I learn in Visual Studio. If I can learn a new trick, a new feature each week, I've advanced. I'm becoming a more productive developer.
I definitely agree. It's the little things for me. It's like, you know what? I learned one new thing today, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
And it's something that I can incorporate in my life. And that's great.
That's a good day.
Yep, absolutely. Oh, so here's the trace point action. I know you're on the edge of your seat. So if you try to look for it in the output window, it's really hard to find. Here it is. I messed up the syntax on the book thing, but the trace point itself worked.
Yeah.
But yeah, as you can see, that's really hard to find unless you spam asterisks or a letter or something in front of it, so it's easier to locate. But
I'm excited that there's an error in the error message. That's awesome.
I know. That's pretty nice. I do.
But Leslie, what you're saying, I'll put greater thans next to it so it looks almost like a prompt at the beginning of it, so that you can kind of see scanning quickly through. Oh, here's where my message is.
Exactly. So that's pretty nice. And yeah, of course, in the good old events tab, which is my favorite part of Diagnostics tools window, is you can see the trace point here, and you can even filter them out. So if you have a lot of trace points, then you can see it from that location as well, which is great.
Very cool. More filters, more searching. Love it.
More searching, my favorite. I love searching.
Yeah.
Checking your debugging.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
Marcus in the chat room is asking, can you search in the output window?
Can you search in the app? I wish you could. That's been something that I've been pushing for a while.
Does Hugo says that Control F while the window has focus will work.
Oh, you are right.
Look at that. We learned something new today, Hugo.
Hey,
Thank you.
Yep. I'm still learning stuff. Thank you.
Yeah. Needs an icon.
Yes, I agree.
I think hourglass. Or
magnifying glass.
Yeah.
Oh,
Great
my
idea.
goodness. Well, that's I think that's about the time that we had booked for having Leslie here.
Yeah, and thank you, Leslie. I'm totally blown away.
Thanks for having me. I hope you learned something new.
And what session are you doing at DEVint?
I am actually teaming up with Kendra for a double header. So part one, we're going to be talking about the editor primarily and all the cool things that you can do in there, like refactoring and that sort of thing. And then part two, we're going to be talking about debugging and testing.
Awesome.
So
we're
talking about how they work together, how they can work together. That's what we're going to talk about.
Oh, that is so cool. So much energy. Really love it. And like you said, these are things that until you see it, you don't really know that they're there. We're working on the discoverability. It's great stuff.
Absolutely. And that's kind of my biggest goal. Like, we have so many cool things, and my biggest goal is I just want to make sure that people know about the stuff that's already there before we start adding new things and things on top of that.
Well, some encouraging words here from Jonathan, who says, we want more.
Awesome. Yep. We're always working on more. So, and all of your feedback during this session alone has been fantastic from everyone who's been watching. So please continue sharing. I am all ears. No idea is a bad idea.
And Richard, I was even giving a little bit of foreshadowing, just like Leslie said. She'll be with Kendra at the show, but Friday we have Kendra joining us right here.
Yes.
She's great. Everybody should tune into her. Yeah, she knows her stuff especially on refactoring and testing. That stuff is so cool.
Yeah, very powerful stuff.
Before we let you go, Hugo has the final question here. Is there a Debugger Tools team dev blog?
Ooh, that is something that we have been talking about. So currently, all of our blog posts just go to the Visual Studio blog that every team in Visual Studio uses. But we've been in talks, or I've been thinking about like maybe making just an individual thing just specifically for debugging, so it's easier to find all that stuff in one place.
Yeah, sure. Well,
yeah, thanks for that. That gives me some +1 validation.
Yeah,
that might be a really good idea to have.
Very cool stuff. Well, thank you so much, Leslie. This was great, and we look forward to seeing you at the show in Orlando.
Yeah, likewise.
All right.
Thanks so much. See you in April.
Yeah, definitely. See y'all later.
All right. And I'll transition over here. We'll say goodbye to Leslie. There she goes. And it's just the two of us.
Hey, awesome. You know, I just hopped on the Visual Studio blog to see if I could search on debugging see if I could pull out just their things.
If there might be like a tag or something you could grab or a category.
So just a question of whether it works or not.
Yeah. She's tremendous. The insight and the fresh usability that she's been able to bring into those tools. Like some of the folks in chat have said, it's made it much more discoverable. You didn't even know some of those things were there. And to hear people say, oh my gosh, this is going to make what I'm doing, my work, so much easier. It's refreshing to hear. And friends out there, you heard it from Leslie herself.
Hey, yeah.
She loves the feedback and is going to take it back to the team.
You talk about discoverability. Think about what Hugo Dahl just did with, put focus on the output window, hit Control F. Surprise!
It works, right? Like, yeah, those types of things.
Discoverability problem. There's no two ways about it.
Yeah.
Right. There are not common metaphors throughout Visual Studio. We have different icons, different key shortcuts, so forth. Like, it's a challenge, and I think it's definitely an opportunity to level some of that off at some point. But hey, we feel like Hugo taught Leslie something today. There you go.
Yeah. I mean, we're talking about an application that still has source code in it from 20 years ago.
Yeah, true enough. I mean, I hope a lot of that stuff's gotten retired, but it was very much a COM-based IDE tool back in the day. They put WPF over top of it, and slowly have been moving things out. And they've gone, remember MEF? Like,
oh my gosh,
things that did work and didn't work. Like, I don't envy it. If you want an interesting story, you talk to a guy like Mark Miller, building Code Rush, about the challenges they have integrating into Visual Studio, because all those different interfaces and approaches to things that are just part of the battle of making all that stuff work in a tool that's just so wildly important. I also think, because if you live largely in the Microsoft space, you just don't realize how good we've got it.
Yes.
We've got complaints about Visual Studio. Go hang out with the Eclipse guys for a while.
Those folks using Eclipse, using some of those other IDEs, they
kind of envy us. Like, we got our problems, but boy, they've got problems too. Like, building, it's one of those classic issues of it has enough functionality to be useful, which also means there's enough functionality it's confusing.
Yeah.
Right. It's just too many things, and so it's always a battle to sort of sort all that stuff out. All we know for sure is that there's a great team working at Microsoft on it, and we're going to meet some of them in April, and see what they're working on next, and the fact that the program keeps evolving.
Yeah, right. There's something to be said about this is a group, this is a product. These are a set of frameworks and languages that Microsoft continues to invest in daily. It's right. The folks that are at some of these other open source languages, they don't have a financial reward in doing some of these things.
Yeah.
So the fact that Microsoft is doing this, you can buy some of these advanced features that Leslie showed us, but they're worth it.
Yeah. And it does speak to sort of the diversity of things. We also talk about there's too many things. Like, think of all the language. You want to work in F# as well? Like, we just take for granted today in the .NET world that you can code in a variety of languages and they'll just work together.
Yeah.
That's not, you don't have to do any dramatic level of interfacing. It's not a big deal. You want to write that piece in F#, write it in F#. You want to write that in C#, fine. You want to write in VB.NET, okay. Or even plus, right? C++.NET, stay inside of the managed environment.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Just not that difficult, and we've forgotten it used to be impossible.
Yeah, and the fact that this same team is sharing their tools and sharing and open sourcing some of those features over to Visual Studio Code, where right it becomes then the Lego set of code editor over there. You want the same debuggers in Visual Studio Code, but you can snap that together with whatever features you want to make it as powerful, as complex as you need to. Really, really great stuff that, you're right, we take for granted.
Yeah, so it's always there. And we've got a bunch of great studio folks. I mean, Kendra's obviously there. You're coming out.
Oh, yes.
You know some things, too.
One or two.
Who else on the team is coming out?
We have some of the folks who work on the container tools or work on some of the Azure tools that you get from Visual Studio. I'm trying to bring up the website here because I don't have off the top.
You know Brady Gaster's coming.
Brady Gaster. Oh, yes.
And we've got him coming on the stream in a few days too, so that'll be good fun. He's just a ball of energy too, but he's been working on the SignalR stuff for a while. And SignalR's evolved a lot. Like it's not the simple tool that David and Damien made all those years ago.
No, and the advantage that we're seeing and that's so great about SignalR is that live interaction. Now they've taken that beyond just, oh, we're going to make a stock ticker, oh, we're going to make a chat thing, but they're making it deliver real value with things like Blazor server side, so that you get tremendous response back and forth between your application. And when Brady gives demos, right, we've been interactive here, talking to chat and talking to each other and doing this very two-way discussion and presentation here. Brady takes interactive demos to a whole nother level. Yeah. He's a session that if you're going to get into one, go see Brady, because he's not going to just let you sit there and watch a session. Pick up your phone and get ready to go to a website he's going to have you interact with.
What do you bet when we talk to him on the stream next week that he doesn't get the whole everybody watching to plug in as well?
Oh my gosh. I hope he does.
Guessing, but I've hung around with Brady enough to know he's prone to that sort of thing.
Absolutely. And we've also got some other folks coming out that are going to speak to not just hey, build cool .NET thing or get low into debugging stuff, but for those folks that are trying to do more with less code. We've got Greg Hurlman coming out to join us, who's going to talk about Power Platform.
Well, I don't think, as .NET developers, I don't think we can ignore the Power Stack. Like it's going to become too important, and it's going to be a competitive advantage. Recognizing that our jobs are actually to provide solutions to our customers, whether that's our internal users, external users, and so forth. The fact that there's this suite of great tooling out there that may not involve a lot of code, but provides a lot of functionality, you ignore at your peril. Like, we've got to be up to speed on it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So really looking forward to seeing how we can empower and enable those folks. And we'll talk to Greg here in a couple weeks here on the stream as well. Hugo chimes in the chat room and says a session between Brady and some Twilio folks could get quite interactive.
Yeah, that's one way of putting it. Okay. Oh,
I'm talking to my friends out there, right? If they're listening, Corey Hurricane Weathers and Chef Brent Schooley over there at Twilio, you may want to give Brady a call.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Oh my gosh, this was great. A full day, full session here, chatting with you. Always a pleasure, my friend.
Always good. And well done on the stream earlier today as well.
Oh, thank you.
You've done a lot of streaming today.
We only did 4 hours this time.
A mere 4 hours, and you made some progress on the project.
So we pushed out another version of these components. So these are Blazor components that look and feel like the old web forms controls that we've had since 2002. And now we can do a tree view in Blazor using the same syntax. That's pretty big.
Yeah, but you're sort of hitting on an interesting point, which is that Blazor server side stuff feels a lot like web forms of old. They sort of recognize the metaphors.
And we've, as a project team, we've kind of stumbled over the past 2 weeks into, wait a sec. I was building pages, a page, an ASPX file. And you can find lots of ASPX files roaming around the internet. Folks running their websites on ASP.NET. But we're going to need to move that into either a Razor file that calls a Blazor component or a Blazor page that hosts all those other components. Well, at some point, couldn't I just take that, if I made it a Blazor page, couldn't I take that instead of running on the server side, run it in the browser as WebAssembly?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a whole new thing happening there that we got to figure out and be like, that could be really cool to do as well.
That is a question, like possibilities. And the debugging question is still out there.
Yeah.
At some point, they'll find a way to allow the debugger to hook into this stuff. But, sandboxes are important. It's part of what makes the web safe, and it's going to be tricky to get around some of them.
Yeah. Jonathan9375 is asking, are these going to be available as a podcast? Well, they're going on the YouTube channel.
Yep.
Maybe we can take that back to some of our friends at DEVIntersection and see if they can set up an RSS feed that links up some of the videos, because we have the videos.
You can always subscribe to the YouTube channel, and I'm looking at the couple of hours we spent, and there's a few, 4 or 5 minute nuggets we should pull out.
Oh yeah.
Just like discovering that output window search.
Yeah, and friends, you there in the chat room, if there was something here that spoke to you, grab a clip. Let us know. Share it out on social media so other folks can see, hey, look at this cool thing Leslie showed us about debugging, right? Or we had Donovan the other day. Hey, look what Donovan showed us. I can use this in my projects. Call those out. Let us know those really cool clips that you see out there or something that spoke to you. And share that out on social media. We'd really appreciate, spreading the good word about the stuff we're doing here. And because we've got a bunch of these sessions queued up, we should probably put a schedule below the video here on the channel.
It's going to be a busy February. There's lots to talk about. Get them out in front of you so you know what's coming.
Absolutely.
All right, friend.
All righty. I think that's another show.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, friends. We'll see you next time. That'll be on Friday. Same time. We're at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, and that's carry the one. Is that 1500? No, 1700 UTC. We'll be back on Friday.
Yeah, and it'll be our guest this time will be Kendra Havens.
Fantastic. Take care, friends. We'll see you then.